At my brother's wedding, I was using a wheelchair because of my condition. My dad took $200 from me and forced me to leave the celebration. When I came back to ask for my money, he lost his temper. He yelled, "You're going to pay for this." Then he grabbed a big microphone stand and struck me on the head so hard that I cried out. But right then, I brought someone in. And the second my dad saw who it was, he stopped in shock. Hello, I'm Nora Carter, and I'm 32 years old. I currently reside in Seattle, where I mostly lead a calm and focused life, coding, mentoring, and working on a foundation I created from the ground up. From the outside, I may seem like someone who has it all together, but this sense of peace wasn't handed to me. I had to fight for it. I'm a twin. My brother's name is Logan. We were born just 3 minutes apart in a small clinic in Walla Walla, Washington. I came first, but I didn't cry. The umbilical cord had wrapped around my neck, cutting off the oxygen to my brain. I survived, but just barely. That one moment, those few seconds of silence, shaped the rest of my life. Logan was born strong, loud, and healthy. The whole room cheered for him, while I was quickly taken to intensive care, my tiny body unable to function. As it should. Doctors diagnosed me with cerebral palsy. My legs never gained strength, and I've been in a wheelchair since I was 2. However, the real challenge wasn't just the physical aspect. It was how the world, especially my family, treated me because of it. We grew up on the edge of an apple orchard. My father, Martin, was a hardworking man with calloused hands, a permanent frown, and no time for tenderness. To him, Logan was everything he ever desired in a child, while I was just a shadow in the corner. I often wondered if he even saw me at all. This story isn't merely about disability. It's about feeling invisible in your own home. It's about what happens when love is conditional and silence becomes your only means of survival. But one day, I stopped being quiet. One day, I declared, enough. My earliest memories aren't filled with laughter or family dinners. They involve watching my brother run across the orchard while I sat by the window, my small hands gripping the armrests of my first wheelchair, wondering what it felt like to be chosen, to be acknowledged. When I was 8, I mustered the courage to ask my father if I could help in the fields. I remember his exact words. He didn't even look at me and muttered while sharpening his pruning shears, "The orchard's not for people like you," as if my existence had already been deemed worthless. Logan, on the other hand, could do no wrong. He was agile, strong, and loud in all the right ways. My father taught him how to climb trees, use tools, and pack crates. They worked side by side, dirt under their nails and laughter in their voices. I pretended I didn't mind being left inside, but I did. For my 10th birthday, my mom, Linda, secretly saved to buy me a basic electric wheelchair. I still remember the thrill of sitting in it for the first time, imagining the paths I could now navigate on my own. But a week later, Dad gave it to Logan to test it out in the yard. He scratched the wheel covers and broke the adjustment lever. When I cried, Dad looked at me flatly and said, "You ain't got legs. What does it matter what chair you sit in?" That line stuck with me for years. At school, I was the quiet kid with awkward limbs and a teacher's assistant always nearby. I stopped raising my hand after a boy mocked the way I spoke during a presentation. At family gatherings, I was squeezed between the entryway and the table, out of sight from the camera flashes, which always focused on Logan. Even when I scored the highest on a math test in 5th grade and Mom proudly taped it to the fridge, Dad replaced it the next day with a photo of Logan picking apples. "That's the one doing real work," he said. In that house, real work was the only thing that mattered. It wasn't just the significant moments that hurt, it was the small ones that chipped away at me day by day. The way Logan would get an extra slice of pie without asking, the way Dad would walk past me without a glance, the way I'd be wheeled to the corner during birthdays while Logan blew out candles under chandeliers. Yet, throughout it all, there was one person who made me feel valued. Mom. Linda was the only warmth in that cold orchard house. She made me softer apple pies because my teeth were weak. She taught me how to use the joystick on my wheelchair, gently guiding my hand until I got it right. She never raised her voice, but her presence spoke volumes. I remember one October afternoon more clearly than any other. The wind had picked up, and golden leaves covered the backyard. I wanted to reach the small garden where Mom and I used to sit. As I wheeled myself forward, one of the wheels got stuck in the soft earth. I tried rocking it free, but it tipped, and I fell forward, face first into the wet grass. I couldn't sit up, my back throbbed, and my left arm trembled from muscle tightness. I yelled for help over and over, but no one came until my father passed by. He looked at me with no expression and said, "Why do you keep trying to do things you can't do? Isn't it enough that you make life harder for everyone?" Then, reluctantly, he grabbed my arm to pull me up so tightly that I gasped from the pain. But the worst part wasn't him. It was Logan, standing just a few feet away. He saw me lying there, heard every word, and turned to walk away. That night, I didn't cry. I clenched my teeth and swallowed my feelings as I always did. But a few minutes later, Mom came rushing out, kneeling beside me in the hallway. She didn't say anything to Dad or scold Logan. She just held me gently and firmly, then whispered, brushing the hair from my forehead, "If it hurts, cry. You don't have to be strong. I'm here." So I cried, and for once it felt safe to do so. If I had a home in that house, it was wherever Mom stood. Not the walls, not the orchard, just her arms, her lap, her soft voice. She never made me feel like I had to earn love. I simply had it. But love, as I learned too early, doesn't always last forever. I turned 18 on a chilly February morning, and snow clung to the bare apple trees outside. The house was unusually quiet. No laughter, no movement. Mom had woken up early to bake muffins for me, like she did every year. She was humming softly in the kitchen when it happened. A stroke. She collapsed before she could even call for help. By the time Dad found her, the tray of muffins was still warm, but she was already gone. They said it was sudden and peaceful, that she didn't suffer. But we did. For me, the silence she left behind was unbearable. Her funeral was simple. No one asked if I wanted to say anything, and no one rolled my chair to the front row. I sat, alone in the back, staring at the casket that held everything that had ever made me feel like I belonged. After she died, the house changed overnight. Dad barely spoke, and Logan barely looked at me. The fireplace was never lit again, and the kitchen felt empty without the smell of apples and cinnamon. Mom's room was locked the day after the funeral, and never opened again. But 3 days before her death, she had left something for me, a small tin box on top of the bookshelf, wrapped in tissue paper and tied with green twine. Inside was a pale gray scarf she had hand-knitted and a note in her rounded handwriting. "No matter what anyone else thinks, you still deserve to be here." I read that note 100 times in the weeks after she passed. Each time it felt like she was beside me again, her hand on my shoulder. 6 weeks later, I left that house. I told Dad I was moving out. He didn't ask where. He just nodded once, as if relieved. I took only 3 things with me. The electric wheelchair Mom had given me 1 small suitcase and the scarf in the tin box. That was enough. I didn't have a plan, just a will to survive and my mother's words echoing in my heart. I left the orchard house behind, wheeled down a sidewalk still crusted with snow, and caught the bus heading out of Walla Walla. I thought I'd figure it out as I went, but I didn't get far. 2 towns over, my wheelchair battery died near a gas station. I sat there under a flickering streetlight, cold and unsure of what to do next, when a familiar voice called out, "Nora!" It was Uncle Peter, my mom's cousin. I hadn't seen him in years. A gentle man with weathered hands and kind eyes. His wife, Aunt Nancy, was with him. They were driving home from a late dinner when they saw me sitting alone in the dark, wrapped in my scarf. Their faces fell. They didn't ask questions or make me explain. They just loaded my chair into their SUV and took me home. That night, I was given a warm meal, a soft bed, and something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Peter and Nancy lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Spokane. Their home was spacious and inviting, filled with photos, soft music, and the smell of vanilla candles. They had a son, Sam Allen, who was my age, tall, quiet, and studying software development at the local university. He greeted me with a simple nod and didn't treat me like I was fragile, just like anyone else. The next morning, over breakfast, Uncle Peter said, "You're welcome here for as long as you need. No rush, no pressure." Aunt Nancy smiled and added, "But if you want to stay long-term, We can help you get enrolled in classes. You're smart, Nora. You just need the right place to grow. I said yes before I could overthink it, and just like that, a new chapter began. I enrolled in an online tech boot camp for students with disabilities and started learning the language of code, the first language that didn't judge how I moved or spoke. I had no idea where it would lead, but I knew I was finally moving forward. My fingers trembled the first time I typed, "Hello world," not from fear, but from possibility. Code didn't care how fast I moved, it didn't laugh at how I spoke, or hesitate when I rolled into a room. It just responded, true or false, success or error, without judgment. I studied day and night, determined to turn this opportunity into a future. Sam began sitting beside me during study sessions. He had a calm energy, always ready to answer my questions, but never making me feel indebted for it. We grew close, not in loud ways, but in steady, quiet rhythms. He never called me inspiring, he just called me Nora. A year into my studies, I built my first working project, a simple communication app for kids with nonverbal autism. The idea came from a boy in our neighborhood who loved to draw but struggled to speak. I watched his eyes light up when he tapped a picture of an apple, and the app said, "Apple," out loud. That moment opened something inside me. I wasn't just learning to code, I was learning to create meaning for someone else. Sam watched me grow with a kind of pride he never voiced, but I saw it in the way he made extra coffee during late nights and stayed up debugging with me even when he didn't have to. 3. Years later, we launched our first startup together. It was a small platform focused on tech-based therapy tools for children with developmental challenges. We pitched to dozens of investors. Most said no, but one said yes. By our third year, our software was in over 30 treatment centers nationwide. We had helped hundreds of kids communicate and generated enough revenue to cover our costs and continue. Still, I never forgot where I came from. Every fall, I sent a small check to my father, just enough to cover the basics of the harvest season. Not out of guilt, not out of hope, but to remind him I existed. Logan never reached out, and I never asked why. But I did wonder sometimes if they saw the news segment when our platform was featured on TV, with my name beneath it and the revenue numbers scrolling across the screen. Turns out they did, and that's when everything changed. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in years. Dad. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. But then it rang again. And again. I answered on the third ring, placed the phone on speaker, and braced myself. His voice was the same, dry and measured, like he was reading a grocery list. "Logan's getting married," he said. "Her family's helping them buy a house. We're short. Need a little extra to close the deal." He paused. "It's $200,000. I didn't respond right away. My hands froze over my keyboard. "You're doing well, Nora," he added. "Saw that video someone sent. All those centers using your thing. I figured helping your brother once isn't too much to ask." A small fire flickered behind my ribs. Not quite anger, but something colder. "Do you even know what I do?" I asked softly. "Yeah," he said. "Apps, kids, therapy, all that." He spoke like it meant nothing. I ended the call without arguing, and later that night, against every instinct in my body, I made the transfer. $200,000 with one note. "Wishing you both happiness." 3 days later, I received an envelope in the mail, the wedding invitation, formal and embossed with my name printed neatly. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope. I booked a wheelchair-accessible hotel nearby, picked out a quiet but elegant gift, a bottle of aged wine, and carefully wrapped the scarf my mother had knitted into my suitcase. I thought maybe this time I'd be included in the photo. But just 2 days before the wedding, my phone rang again. Dad's voice was low and measured. "It's probably best you don't come." I didn't answer. I waited. He continued. "Some people might feel uncomfortable. You know how these things go." Uncomfortable? I had been the invisible thread in that family quilt all my life. Good enough to sew things together, but never good enough to be seen. That night, I tossed the invitation in the trash. I didn't cry, but for the first time in a long while, I felt truly foolish. I told myself I was done. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't watch from the sidelines again. I wouldn't roll into another. place where I wasn't welcome. Then, on the morning of the wedding, something unexpected happened. Uncle Peter called. "I know what they did," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But you deserve to decide for yourself. Nancy and I are heading to the church if you want to come. We've already set up a space for your chair. Sam will be with us. We'll be there in 20. I hesitated, staring at the packed suitcase still by the door. Then I said, "Okay." Ni, 10:50 a.m. A gray SUV pulled up outside St. Thomas Church. I wore a black suit, no tie, and my mother's scarf gently draped around my shoulders. Sam helped me out of the car and wheeled me toward the side entrance. No one saw me come in. The pews were full, and sunlight poured through stained glass windows, casting soft red and gold shadows on the bride's dress as she walked down the aisle, her hand in Logan's. He looked calm and perfect. I stayed in the back, silent and unseen, but then the officiant spoke. "Before we begin the sacred vows, if any family member would like to share a few words," Aunt Nancy gently touched my shoulder. "Now's your moment, if you want it." I rolled forward. The wheels of my chair echoed against the church floor. All heads turned. I took the microphone from the priest with steady hands. "Logan and I are twins, born minutes apart, same DNA, but from day one, our lives split down two very different paths." The room buzzed with whispers. I turned toward my father in the front row. His jaw was set like stone. I was the child in the wheelchair. He was the one in the photos. I sent money. I sent silence. I sent hope, thinking maybe one day I'd be allowed to belong. My voice softened. "But if this family looks better without me in the picture, then keep the one I'm not in. Just don't mistake a beautiful photo for a complete story." Then I looked at Logan. "You didn't forget me. You chose to ignore me." I left the mic, turned my chair toward the side door, my back straight, eyes forward. No one clapped, no one called my name, no one stood to stop me, except Sam. He was already moving toward me as I wheeled down the aisle, his eyes locked on mine, not with pity, but with pride. Aunt Nancy and Uncle Peter followed close behind. But just as I neared the door, I heard my father's voice behind me, sharp, loud, burning with rage. "You had no right to ruin this day." I turned slowly, keeping my voice calm. "I gave you everything you ever asked for. A house, a check, my silence, and now you embarrass us," he shouted, storming down the aisle in his rage. He reached for the microphone stand, tall, metallic, and heavy. Before anyone could stop him, he swung it forward, and the cold metal struck the side of my head. I heard gasps, then silence. The sound of the impact echoed through the church like a bell. My vision blurred, and blood trickled down the side of my face. I heard Sam yell, "Call 911!" Within seconds, he was by my side, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders. I saw Logan standing frozen, watching the chaos, not moving, not speaking. Then he did the unthinkable. "She asked for it," he muttered. Just like that, his bride stepped away from him. "What did you say?" she asked, horror in her voice. "She shouldn't have shown up," he said, shrugging. Her expression hardened. She ripped the veil from her head and turned to her parents. "We're leaving." The wedding was over. Meanwhile, the police arrived within minutes, and Sam provided a full statement. So did several guests. Martin, my father, was arrested on the spot for assault with a deadly weapon. As officers escorted him away, another officer turned to Logan, who was still trying to justify everything to the bride's family. "You encouraged the attack?" the officer asked. Logan didn't deny it. He was arrested too, right there in the church where they planned to start a new life. Two men who had once ignored me were finally seen for who they really were. And I, bleeding but unbroken, rolled into the ambulance with Sam beside me. The hospital lights were harsh, but I barely noticed. Sam sat next to me the whole night, holding my hand as the doctors cleaned the cut on my head and ran their scans. I had a mild concussion and a few stitches, but the damage was nothing compared to what had been done to my heart over the years. This time, I wasn't going to stay silent. The next morning, still in a hospital gown, I gave a full police report. Sam helped me draft my official statement. Aunt Nancy and Uncle Peter stood behind me like a wall of unwavering support. A week later, with the help of a lawyer Sam found through a disability rights group, I filed charges: second-degree assault against my father, criminal complicity, and defamation against my brother. Court hearings began 6 weeks later. The evidence was overwhelming. Guest testimonies, security footage, even the wedding photographer's microphone had picked up parts of the confrontation. The judge listened silently as the prosecutor played the video of my father swinging the stand and Logan excusing it, the bride calling off the wedding. When it was time for sentencing, the courtroom was silent. "Martin," the judge said, "you showed no remorse for your actions. Assaulting your disabled daughter with a weapon in front of witnesses is unforgivable. You are sentenced to 5 years in state prison with no chance of early parole." Logan tried to appear indifferent as his sentence was read. 2 years for criminal complicity, plus mandatory counseling for anger management and empathy training. Neither looked at me as they were led away in handcuffs, but I didn't need them to. I wasn't there for their regret. I was there for my closure. After the trial, life didn't just revert to normal, it transformed into something better. My foundation, the Nora Project, expanded. We funded 3 more communication apps, partnered with schools, and offered scholarships to disabled students. Through it all, Sam remained by my side, kind, loyal, and patient. One spring morning, under the same tree where we first tested my app with that little boy, he proposed, and I said yes. We had a small wedding. No orchards, no chandeliers, no speeches from people who didn't really know us. Just soft music, genuine smiles, and people who had stood by me when I had nothing. Uncle Peter walked me down the aisle. Aunt Nancy wept, quietly in the front row, holding Sam's baby picture in her hand like a quiet blessing. And Sam, my Sam, looked at me as if I were the only person in the world who mattered. For the first time, I believed it. We moved into a 1-story house in West Seattle, fully accessible, filled with warm lights and bookshelves. The tin box with my mother's scarf sat on our mantel beside a framed photo of her holding me as a baby. Every morning, I touched it, a silent promise to carry her strength forward. The foundation thrived. We hired a full team. I spoke at conferences and mentored young girls in wheelchairs who once thought they'd never be seen. 9 months after our wedding, on a rainy autumn morning, I gave birth to our daughter. We named her Grace because that's what she was. As I held her against my chest in the hospital room, I felt the world quiet. The years of being ignored, the cold rooms, the wounds that never fully healed. They didn't disappear, but they softened. Grace had Sam's eyes and my hands, and she would grow up never having to wonder if she belonged. Sometimes, I still think about my father and Logan, both still serving their sentences. I wonder if they regret anything, if they ever say my name. But I don't wait for their apologies anymore. I've learned something that took me decades to understand. Family isn't made from blood or shared DNA. It's made from presence, protection, and love that doesn't come with conditions. Now, when I look at my daughter, I don't feel fear. I feel peace because she'll never have to earn her place in this world. She'll grow up in a home where softness is strength, and silence is never mistaken for love. And as for me, I'm finally home. Thanks for watching.